Well, I'm calling this the boat, but actually I'm finishing up a little detail on the house. There's an old pump that sits outside and it's still intact. Probably doesn't work, but very rusty. It's kind of an interesting detail and a little bit tricky to paint. Um, I'm trying to get the right color and working it up through layers. And I'm starting with just a really light version of sienna and burnt sienna, and for my rust color, and then I'm adding a little orange to it, and a little yellow ochre, and essentially drawing over a light sketch and using a pretty small brush here. But I'm trying to identify, which of the faces of the machinery are catching the light and are going to be the lightest, and kind of leave those, and then gradually work into the darks, because light in this picture comes slightly from the left and obviously from above. So everything is going to be lit accordingly. I do have a detail that I'm looking at, and I'm kind of holding that. It's not particularly sharp, but I can see it well enough. And having been to this site many times, I know this spot, so it makes it a little easier. And also, you need to understand when you draw equipment or anything mechanical, you kind of need to understand it a little bit. Like there's a couple of tanks on here, there's some pipe work, there's a big fan housing on the back side of it, and so it really helps me to know what the functions of things are, because without that, you're just sort of drawing shapes and you don't relate them to one another very well, because you don't know what they're doing. So a little bit of understanding there. I mean, I don't have to know the inner workings of this thing, but I do need to know the relationships of the planes and surfaces a little bit. Just makes it easier in general. You could just go and make a blurry, piece of equipment here, but then when you look at it, you might question what's it doing there and why and what is it. So I need to be at least that descriptive with the painting to, let observers know what this thing is, or why it would be in front of this. Or actually, it's on the side of this old building. So this is how it started, and of course I'll get to the boat here a little bit later on in the video. But it turned out to be a bit of a challenge, because I didn't like my colors, and I'm still not 100% on them, and I may do a light wash to bring them over to the little bit more brown, a little more of that oxide, red iron oxide type of look. So I think I've got too much red, and they don't look rusty enough. And so I'll work on that, and that at least is something that's not really hard to accomplish. You just let your paint dry, and now you'll see that as I proceed here, I make several goof ups. At least that's how they felt, and they're not really all hard to alter. I mean, you're going to get the staining of the paper, but it's not anything that's going to really mess up the area. And what you can do is just get some clear water, put it over the areas that you want to lift, let it sit over the top of the paint, and then just lightly press, and I mean lightly press, a paper towel or any kind of tissue absorbent on that, and it'll lift a lot of the color. If you want to lift a little bit more, just get that area wet again. And when you get the area wet, don't just spread water over the whole thing. Just put the water specifically on the parts you want to lift, and it's going to pick up pigment and it will lighten it. And so you can do that a number of times, and it'll get lighter and lighter each time. In that way, you can make alterations. I mean, people say watercolor is unyielding, and to a degree, I would agree. I would accept that, because when you have white paper with the sizing and it has untouched and it's ready to accept color, there's nothing more absorbent than watercolor paper, and nothing that stains more. So whatever you put on it, it's going to register, and it will come back as kind of an echo of what you did. No matter what you do over the top of it subsequently, it's always going to have that initial application underneath, and it's going to show a little bit, or it'll affect what goes over it. So you want to put things down that, if you need to alter, can be, for example, made darker. It's easy to go dark. It's not easy to go light again. It's hard to get that luminescence back of the white paper coming through pigment. So I try and think in those terms, like where my area is going to be. What do I not want to lose? Where is the white really essential? And so with that in mind, I did a number of attempts with this little bit of equipment here, kind of messed it up, and then I got something I was reasonably pleased with. But overall, I'm going to be changing it somewhat down the line. Just I got a little bit too carried away with the color, and color this is back from the viewer. So from a distance, you don't get the intense chroma of color. So you need to kind of dull it down a little, and calm it down a little bit. So if it's right up next to you in the foreground, then you can pump it up with as much, pigment as you like, because that's the way we perceive things. But something way off against this house shouldn't have saturation, real high saturation of color. Well, anyway, we'll go to the music. I'll speed this up, and when I start working the boat, I will come back and I'll have a few things to discuss about the boat, and then I'm gonna be kind of wrapping this thing up. So I'll be back in a bit. while I'm getting down to some fine details and finishing up, I've got just a couple little things back at the house here on this little pump. There's some wiring that I've sketched in with a pencil really lightly, and now I'm just adding a little bit of color, which is just a little burnt sienna and some raw sienna. I use a little bit of blue on the cords and a little bit of gray, and they keep those light. I'm not trying to draw a lot of attention to the wiring, but it's there, so I don't want to ignore it. And I've done a lot on the boat. I've looked at it for a couple of days, and I don't want to do so much that it becomes the focal point, because this painting is intended to draw you in, and then you're going to catch your eye with what's in the foreground, but you're going to want to look behind it. I'm trying to create a lot of depth here so that you end up looking all the way back to the hills behind, and you can see the snow on the mountains. I think I like the house itself. It's the strongest image here in this composition, and partly I think it has to do with the way the light's striking it, and the shadows that are cast. The rocks are pretty cool. I enjoyed doing a lot of those, and marbling and splotches, and some of the driftwood that's laying in there. The reflection was fun to do. It's all been enjoyable, really. You don't have to be ultra precise, because, if your rock looks a little different than maybe what you saw in a photograph or whatever, after a while I abandoned my photos, actually, because you get kind of a sense of, how you want to proceed with them, and what your strategy is for painting each rock. And as I work my way through this painting, I'm reminded that my best work usually comes when I treat every area as its own individual composition and a painting in itself. And I'm not necessarily dividing the picture plane into segments or areas and declaring those are individual paintings. What I mean by that is perhaps the house or a portion of it and its immediate surroundings are like a painting, and the mountains in themselves could be a painting. The boat in the foreground could be its own composition. And each subject you want to give equal weight to. And by that, I'm including background areas and just nature in general. You don't want to overlook any particular part of it. Now, you may want to maybe not emphasize a certain place in your picture as much, with a lot of accents and highlights, which tend to draw the eye. If you're trying to direct the eye around the painting, the easiest way to do it is with color, which this pump serves a purpose in that. It has kind of a rich color, and I think your eye is going to be drawn back that way. But another way is with bright highlights and dark accents on an object. Your eye is going to go there and linger a little bit before you move on. And so that's one way to move the eye around. The other one is, like I said, intense color and chroma will draw your eye. And another thing that draws your eye, and sometimes unintentionally, and maybe something you don't want to do, is get out of your color scheme considerably. I mean, take a big step outside of the palette that you've been using for the rest of the painting, and you use a color that it doesn't occur anywhere else, because that's going to draw the eye too, and very much will command a look, because you're wondering, oh, what's this color doing here with all of these other earth tones? Why is it there? And that's the way you kind of process that. So if you do that intentionally, it's effective, but unintentionally, and sometimes you may want to relook and possibly paint over an area, lift some of that color, change it slightly with a layer of a wash over the top, and if it doesn't seem to work with the rest of your composition. Now, in my case here in this painting, I had to kind of consider what I was doing with the boat, because I've got a big collection of boat photographs that I've taken, and I looked at all of them, and I didn't like the color of any particular boat for this application, and also the lighting wasn't correct. So I had to sort of think it through, and I didn't want the boat, as I mentioned, to be the focal point. Even though it's in the foreground, it's big and it grabs you, just because of its size. I had to think about maybe using less intense color and kind of toning it down a degree or two, so that it didn't dominate too much. And I'll skip ahead for a little more discussion on that as we get further into this. Right here, what I'm doing is just a little touch up of an edge that just bugged me for whatever reason, and straightening it up a little bit. It probably wouldn't bother anyone else but me. Nobody else would notice it, but it's just something that, as I was working, I would pick up on, and it just my eye kept going back there. So when that happens, I usually have to deal with it. So I'm going to talk a little bit here in a minute about my signature, which is coming up. And when I do a signature, I like to try and incorporate it into the composition, and not make it so big that it draws too much attention. I feel I've seen a lot of paintings where I thought the artist did a super job with their work and had a great composition, and then unfortunately I've seen examples where the signature just kind of worked against all of that, and was kind of crude, and was not worked into the composition, wasn't in a good spot, or it was too much color, or just was at odds with the rest of the painting. So although Picasso could get away with it, I like my signature to kind of be something that you have to discover as you look around, and not something that's just plastered right over the top in big bold letters. So, and in fact, when I do mine, I always do it the same way. I don't know why. I guess, well, it is your signature, but I'm using I'm not going longhand. I'm printing out the letters, and it's M period S period Kirkpatrick, and I usually will use a combination of a couple colors. Like there's some Prussian and cerulean that I will sketch out the letters first, and then I usually go back with some cadmium red with a little bit of blue mixed in with that to kind of make a purple, and then a little bit of orange and probably a little bit of white. And when it all mixes together, you can see elements of each of those colors, but they all also will combine to an extent in the letters. And the letters are not super distinct. However, they're clear, and I'm not sure that this is high enough definition imagery here in this. My camera is doing the job. It's hard to tell, but I think it will, and you'll get the idea. But it does take me a minute to do my signature, and I like doing the signature because I know I'm finished, and I'll never sign anything until I'm completely satisfied that it's totally finished and I can move on. So signature is kind of fun to do, and even with it, I'm deliberate. And as you've probably watched my style, you know that I'm not knocking out a painting every other day. They take me, a painting will take me a month. And I don't think I'm lazy, but I have to be in the mood. I do have to feel like painting, and I don't every day. But once I get going, sometimes I'll just paint for 6-8 hours and not even budge. And then I'll wonder what happened to that day. And it's not very healthy, actually. I need to, probably set a timer or something, because you've got to get up and move and do some things. But that's just that's what happens when I'm working and getting really, really into it. So this one's just about done. There are, I don't know how many rocks are in this, but I probably won't be doing a lot of those for a while. I've kind of had my fill of the big boulder, but they are kind of cool to do. And I do like the way many of them came out. And I did some marbling, and I did some work with using a resist material, which is the masking fluid. I have kept some of the white and used that as highlights on the rocks, and also streaks and blotches, and it works really well to put that down and then paint. And then, of course, after your paint's all dry, then you can remove it and you've got that white underneath, and then you can go back in and paint over the white that you don't want, or just put a different tone over it, add a different value, and play with it that way. It's kind of fun. So I'll probably just move on from here. I don't know what my next subject will be, but I hope you keep hanging in there with me, even though I don't post a lot of videos. There'll be more, and I really thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the music from Jim Brandt, and we'll see you next time.
like a loop machine.